Hello and welcome to another episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. I'm Mike Evans.
And I'm David Price.
And David, on this week's riff, what are we going to be reviewing?
It's the Nakamichi 600 cassette deck, Mike.
Which is a magnificent looking, amazing, futuristic cassette deck.
It is.
Bearing in mind the year it came out, which was
1975.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like something out of Star Trek, isn't it? With the consoles on the screen. In fact, I think they called it. In fact, we have one here. Look at this. It's brilliant. And I'm not sure if I can quite get the correct angle, but it's called a ski slope design.
Yeah,
is that right?
It was one of the first so-called ski slope cassette decks, this is. I think it's fair to say that the deck that started the whole ski slope kind of trend was the Yamaha TC800 GL, which came out in, I think, the year before, in 74, and the Nakamichi came out in 75, and by 76, 77, virtually half the cassette decks you could buy on the market were just like this.
Yes.
And they were, had a sort of dramatically, it was almost like a Lotus Esprit kind of shape,
sure.
Wasn't it?
Sure. You could have it with your Nitec calculator amp as well, couldn't you? And you could have a whole load of slopey hi-fi.
Yep.
But this is, I think this is really cool and really stylish, and we've just been sort of chatting about this, and I think you sort of said this was quite a seminal moment for Nakamichi, because they obviously, the rest is history, as it were. They became synonymous with making the best cassette decks in the world, the ones you would aspire to.
Yeah.
But this really got them into the game, didn't it? It wasn't their first,
no,
but it really got them into the game.
Well, absolutely. I think the first one was the first Nakamichi was the 1000, which was called the Tri-Tracer to its friends, and that came out in 73. And it was fair to say it was a very niche product.
Yes.
It was very expensive, but it was important because, as far as I know, and I might be wrong, I don't think so, but I'm happy to be corrected. It was the first three-head dual capstan design of cassette deck. It was a very expensive and exotic thing. Almost no one could afford one. And I think it was Nakamichi's first cassette deck ever as well.
Sure.
But it kind of put down a blueprint for Nakamichi as a purveyor of very high-end, very serious cassette decks. Very early on, 73 was pretty early on in cassette's life. The cassette format had come out in 63, but people had been using it for sort of portables and, kind of dictation and all of that sort of stuff until about 70, 71, 72. And the early Nakamichi 1000 kind of told people that cassette was serious. It was a serious hi-fi medium. But the thing is, it was too expensive, it didn't look particularly good, and then along came the 600, which did look very good and was less expensive and also measured better than the Mark I Nakamichi Tri-Tracer. It had half the wow and flutter, and it had a better frequency response. So for this to come out in 75, it did an awful lot. It ticked a lot of boxes. It was fantastic to look at, had very zeitgeisty styling, had great performance from a two-head single capstan deck, and it started to make people think Nakamichi was a really serious, not just a one-trick pony manufacturer.
But it wasn't cheap, was it? I mean, if we're kind of looking at sort of like an adjusted price, I think did you say to me this was about £350 when it came out?
Roughly. I mean, it's not completely clear, but I think it was around, certainly in 1978, which was the last year that it sold. It was about 350 quid.
And to put that into perspective, how much would an LP12, a Lin LP12, have cost around about then?
That was just under 300.
Just under 300. So this was a big chunk more than a Lin Sondek at the time.
Yeah.
So but they sold really, really well because they were such brilliant sounding cassette decks.
Yeah, they were certainly for the day, for the period. they were brilliant sounding. I think by the standards of, for example, the CR7 that came out roughly 10 years later, they weren't brilliant sounding. The CR7 is on another level. But for the time, you've got to remember, everything's relative. And in 1975, very few cassette decks sounded anything near, sort of neutral and as detailed and open as the original source.
Sure.
So yes, it was quite spectacular at the time.
And I think that it really paved the way, didn't it, for Nakamichi to get to that CR7 in 10 years' time.
Yeah.
This was their entry into sort of seriousness and affordable, and put them on the map. And actually, dare I say it, I know we've done a sort of cassette deck reviews before. We did the Iowa, didn't we?
We did,
which was really lovely deck, the 600. But I think Nakamichi is still synonymous with if you really want a serious deck, that's the name to go for. And the CR7 was what we aspired to. Yeah. I never owned one. Did you own one?
Yeah.
Did you?
I did. Yeah.
Did you? I never. In fact, no. I've heard one, and I've made some recordings onto one back in the day. Yeah. But never owned one. But I could. It was a fantastic deck. But this was the start of it, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think absolutely it was the sort of stepping stone for Nakamichi becoming what we later went to know it as.
Yes.
And in the kind of hardcore cassette fan circles, there's a lot of debate about whether Nakamichi were as good as people said. That I think they were excellent. I think the CR7 was fantastic, but there were other great cassette decks as well.
Sure.
Although they were harder to get hold of, and a lot of them were Japan only.
Yes.
So that's another argument for another day. But
actually, to be fair, some of their budget models, quote unquote, weren't that great.
Yeah.
And they could be outpaced by Sony's.
Yeah.
And Iowas and the like. But certainly the high end stuff was always fantastic.
Yes.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah. And there's some interesting bits in here, aren't there? And I probably don't really understand all of them. There's you can generate your own 400 kilohertz tone, for example.
Yep.
For calibration.
That's right. It's got a test tone somewhere over there.
There we are.
Yeah, that's it. And all of these things here are calibration presets. You can calibrate whatever tape you're using for recording level, bias level, and what Nakamichi called IM suppression, which is still not entirely clear to me what it was. Something about intermodulation distortion or something, but pretty hardcore stuff, I think. You
could record your 400 hertz tone, play it back, and if your VUs were just touching zero, then you were spot on.
Your game on.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? Don't get that these days.
No.
Excellent. And sound quality wise, I know you talked about the wow and flutter figures, but there's more to a cassette deck than that. And what I haven't heard this, I've got to be honest. Yeah. How does it sound? How does she perform?
It sounds smooth and quite sweet and warm. So the wow and flutter is 0.5%, which is half the tri-tracer, the first tri-tracer. And in terms of the best ever cassette deck kind of thing is roughly half of the wow and flutter of this. So it is, it's not the greatest in terms of measurements, but at the time it was certainly, I think, pretty much as close as it could be. It's got a very wide, very, very good frequency response. It went up to 20 kilohertz with chrome tape, which was, again, very unusual for that time. Most 70s cassette decks would struggle to do 13, 14 kilohertz with chrome tape, apart from the really good ones. That was a really good stat.
Or even play chrome tapes, for that matter.
Yeah. But here we have and
just demonstrated.
Absolutely. Well, we have the one tape that this machine was not set up for, which was a Sony Ferrochrome.
Well.
Because Nakamichi refused to use Ferrochrome because it was Sony's format, designed by Sony. But you could actually get away with it. You could still record in Chrome and use standard ferric equalization. So, but it doesn't have a Chrome setting. It only has chrome and ferric. So there you go.
That's amazing.
So don't tell Nakamichi I'm using that; they'll be angry.
So if I were to, I mean, I know they sold quite a lot of these, so you can still pick them up, and eBay purchases and so on, and they're quite reasonably priced. But I guess my $1 million question is, in terms of keeping them on the road, how hard is that? Are they serviceable? And I know Nakamichi were sort of famous of happily showing off their wiring diagrams and circuit plans and all that stuff.
So I think up to a point, I don't think you can buy new heads for them anymore. But again, the heads can be relapped, and they don't tend to wear as much as some heads do. And there are plenty of machines around as well, so you can pick up other cheap machines as parts machines. The belts are pretty easy to get hold of. All of the electronic components inside, I think, are relatively standard. There's no kind of crazy chips that were only ever used in one machine, as far as I know. So it's not a completely wild proposition to own and to repair. It's not quite the most easily fixable, but it's not too bad.
Sure.
I think if you're looking to buy one, just try and buy one that doesn't have a visibly worn record replay head. I.e. with a little kind of slot or groove, where the tape goes.
Yeah, sure.
That's pretty much if that's okay, then the machine should work. Or should be
pretty
fixable.
Solid, really.
Yeah.
And build quality, you can feel it. I can hardly lift the thing. Typical Nakamichi.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes,
solid as.
A lovely kind of precise action to the controls as well. They're sort of damped piano controls. They're about as nice as manual controls can feel.
Yeah, there's no full logic going on there, is there? No. Excellent. But no, what a beautiful thing. Thank you so much for bringing it over. I've thoroughly enjoyed having a look at this today. I don't think I've ever seen one in the flesh before. So a bit of beautiful sort of hi-fi history. Hi-fi sort of esoterica from the mid-70s.
And of course, you can use it, Mike, with your amp, because it's got a DIN output.
It would work beautifully with my Nate one, wouldn't it? Yeah, excellent.
Yes,
excellent. There we are. Fantastic. And on that bombshell, look, we should rate it on our Mike and Dave's Retro Hi-Fi Riff. Out of 10, what are you going to give it?
I'm going to give it, obviously as a retro riff, I'm going to give it 8.5.
Okay. So, well, look, I haven't heard it, so it'd be a bit unfair for me to judge it in any way, shape, or form. But I'll just happily agree with you.
Okay.
And we'll do 2 8.5s.
All right.
And there we are. And if you can pick one up in good working order, then judging by the look of this,
well, there are quite a few around.
Yeah.
It's still not impossible to find one on eBay, and the prices are very low.
Yes.
200 to 300 quid kind of thing for an average one, and 300 to 400 for a really good one like that. So they're a lot of fun for the money, I'd say.
I've still got a big box of mixtapes which I used to play in my Ford Capri, and it had a cassette deck. So I think we should go and drag that out and play some hits from the 80s.
Absolutely.
And on that note, thank you very much indeed for watching this episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. It's been an absolute pleasure. And we'll see you at the next one. Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.